If you've in criticism for your book or you're concerned about ever having to take criticism for your book, you're going to want to stay tuned for this episode. Welcome to the Christian Indie Writers Podcast, where we inform, encourage, and support Christian indie writers on their journey toward publication. My name is Jennifer Carl Tong, and I write historical Christian romance.
My name is Christina Catane, and I write multiple genres, including Christian fantasy and mystery.
I'm Jamie Hirschberger. I write short fiction under the pen name J.R. Nichols.
And welcome, everybody, to the podcast. We're so glad that you are all here. Our live chat is already happening over here on YouTube and on Facebook if you'd like to join us. Good morning to Catherine, who is already here, saying good morning to everybody. And Purpose Behind the Pen is here as well. Good morning to you. This is our time of our podcast that we start off every week where we share what's going on in our lives. We call it our What's Up. It's a time for us to share what's going on personally, sometimes professionally, but just a moment for us to catch up since last week. So, Jamie, what's up with you?
Well, I have to say that something peculiar about me is that I really enjoy an ice cold beverage over crushed ice. Not shaved ice like a snow cone, but crushed ice, like what you would get from the dispenser refrigerator, right?
Okay.
And in my new domicile here, I didn't have like a blender or anything like that. So I've been using a meat tenderizer and a baggie to like smash ice cubes into broken, jagged pieces, which is like fine, but it's tedious and like really, And so I was like, well, I really want to solve this problem. But of course, I didn't think about it when like Black Friday was happening. So there were no sales. And I tried a blender that didn't work. And I was just really discouraged, et cetera, et cetera. Well, one weekend, I went to my favorite thrift store, which is Ye Old Thrift Shop out in Lady Lake. And
that's really what it's called, is Ye Old Thrift Shop?
Ye Old Thrift Shop. And it's run by like a hospital volunteers.
Yeah, that's all I need to hear to know why it's your favorite, honestly.
It's so great. And everybody who's there is so sweet. They all volunteer to work there. Anyway, I found, I can't even believe it, an ice crusher. Now, if I was just going to buy one, it would be $100, like this particular model, $96 or whatever. But like, I am not a unitasker person and I would just never. But this one was $16.
Yes, I love a good bargain.
And it's like so ridiculous that I have this whole big appliance just to crush ice. It does not make snow cones. Like it doesn't blend or mix or do anything but crush ice cubes just the way I like them. And I'm so thrilled with it. It's ridiculous how happy this thing makes me. And again, I'm usually very anti-unitasker. If you're familiar with Alton Brown, he just gets after people all the time when they buy like a machine or a tool that will do one thing and one thing only. But this makes me so happy. I mean, you can see I've got my like icy beverage with the crushed ice in it. And I just wanted to share that because on this discovery of what makes me happy, this is something I did just because I wanted it. And no more tedious baggies and instead I'm just throwing whole cubes in there and they're coming out beautifully crushed. So happy me. I'm happy about my ice crusher.
I think I'm the opposite of you. I mean, as you're saying that about like the unit, like I have so many things in my kitchen that I love that only have one purpose, but I love them. So like, I don't know what I would do to get rid of some of these things, but that's a whole nother.
My ice maker, my coffee grinder, my espresso maker, my Keurig, like they're all on one cart even. Like,
yeah.
Next to each other.
Sonia says that is awesome, Jamie. Eva Webster says, I love my thrift store too. I love to go thrifting. I told you guys about the girls' dresses for their formal event they went to in February. We just lucked out finding them. I love thrift stores. Yeah. I'm also cheap. So
yeah,
that's a whole other thing too.
You can get some bargains if you know where to look. What's
I really
is it?
like Amazon, so I don't have to get up off my lazy butt and go anywhere.
Yeah, there's 2 types, right?
I know, right? I mean, I was just gonna wait till Black Friday and get like a Ninja because when I was married, I had one, but I left it, and it has like so many blades that it actually will crush the ice. Like so many blenders,
Mhm.
everything just sits in the bottom and it doesn't,
Yes.
you know what I mean? So I was just
Mhm.
gonna wait till Black Friday and just continue using the little mallet, but then I couldn't even believe I found exactly what I wanted. It's bizarre.
That's so funny.
So what's up with
Alright,
you, Jen?
so I don't know what I was gonna share other than that. The only right now is that my hair is driving me crazy. Like, I always have long hair because I can't stand short hair, like, when it starts to grow out and it touches your neck. Like, I don't know, like, it's been a long time since I've had short hair or shortish hair. But today, for some reason, you were not with us. It was me and Tina, and I was just like, I couldn't handle it. My hair, for some reason, felt like it was strangling me. And, so I just threw it up into this, whatever this nonsense is. So, that's
So
really the
messy
only
bun.
it sure is. I had my hair down and whatever because I just getting lazy with my hair. I don't know if it's an age thing, but you can watch the podcast. If you start at the beginning and look at all the like me like how I would do my hair and makeup, and now like more recently, it's in a bun all the time. Like it just drives me crazy. So maybe I just need a haircut. I don't know, but I got a new shirt for those of you that are listening. It
Love
says
it. I love
"And
it.
again, speak again." I was super excited when I found it. Yeah, just a normal week for me. Just trying to think if there's anything else, but no, that's it. Like it's been very boring around here, which I love.
Yeah.
Oh, one more thing. I bought something off of Amazon. You'd be proud of me, Tina. It was a thing that you hook to a drill, and it's these brush sets to clean with.
Oh, okay.
And I did it on my tub last night, which I was super excited because it was getting in the grout. Like I've been scrubbing and not being able because we have an old house that we inherited, and we know we need to like on the plan down the road is the bathroom, right? It's original to the house, and it's just hard to keep it clean. The tile is so old. And anyway, as I'm doing it, the wall where the faucets are, we've been having some leak problems, but not too. My husband's fixed it, whatever. I almost knocked tiles through the wall trying to clean last I'm like, "We know we need to do the bathroom, but wow, we are gonna have to do that sooner than later." So
Oh, no?
Fun.
I
yes,
mean,
it works, but it's pretty powerful. Just to give you guys a heads up if you have an old house, be
My
careful
husband
using
has
those
one of
things.
those attachments that you can
Yeah,
scrub with on his drill.
it's
ooh,
great.
but, like, have you decided what you want to do? Because, like, here I get all excited, "Ooh, tile shopping and and decor choices." Have you thought about any of that?
I don't think I want tile per se. I think that we're gonna do at our old house, which was a newer build. We had our shower in the master was one of those insert
Oh,
things, and it
yeah.
was
Mhm.
so easy to clean. I loved it. And they make tubs like that.
Mhm.
So I think that's what I want. And then because of that, the tubs are like lighter weight, but they're also bigger. They fit in the same area, but they're bigger. I don't even know how to explain that.
Mm.
And the flooring I want is kind of like a snap together kind of flooring that looks like tile and it looks like it has grout. But it's a fraction of the price and you don't have to grout. And I found one I really like. So all these things are things we can do. It's just the money to do it, which will be a fraction of the cost as if we had to pay someone else. But we have to rip out we had to go down the studs when we do this because of the leak,
Oh,
number one.
boy. Yeah.
And number 2, when we inherited the house, we had to take some things out of the bath, like off the walls that were like literally in the wall. I don't know how to
Mhm.
explain it, but the drywall that was used is not the depth of drywall that you can buy anywhere
Mm.
anymore. So it's just gonna be easier to start at the studs instead of trying to like put another piece of drywall in and like get it all level. We're just gonna rip everything out.
Is that your
So
only bathroom?
we have 1.5 baths, so it's our
Oh,
only
okay. So
shower.
but at least you have, like, if you're yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we have our 5th wheel, we can hook up to shower if we need to, but
Oh,
I
fun.
want I just wanna go and I know, right? I just wanna
Mhm.
go and get it done. Well, right now, the 5th wheel, the hot water heater doesn't work, so that's a whole nother project, right? Like, I have our projects are just suffocating me, but yeah, it's like this house. I
And
wish that someone
inserts are so much easier to clean. You know what
I
I do?
know.
Because I have like sciatica and lower back problems.
Mhm.
I have a kitchen broom with hard bristles, and I
Mhm.
spray the stuff on the walls and let it sit for 10 minutes, and I go in there with my broom and I scrub it,
Mhm.
So, I did
and
the
then I
same thing,
rinse it with the shower.
the spray stuff, I did that, but I just had a mop that I would do it with, because, like, you do it once a week and the stuff it's so easy to keep it clean, like, that's my thing, so, yeah, so that's where we are.
We don't have a
Anyway.
mop, we have a Swiffer, so that probably would work.
Oh,
But I like
alri
the hard bristles on my broom, work really
mhm,
well.
that's awesome. Alright, Tina, what's up with you?
Well, there's really not a lot of with my writing career going on. I'm listening to my third book of Firm the Angelica series,
Mhm,
listening to the manuscript. And then I'm going to get into the editing. But I went to a women's retreat a couple weeks ago, and this lady was talking about sacred rhythms. And it's
mhm.
basically like the rhythms of our life that we tend to take the common things of the world and make it sacred in our life and then neglect the things that should be sacred. And I kind of found like was kind of convicted by that because
You mean like habits, right? You and I had this
yes,
conversation. So when they say sacred rhythms, it almost sounds like new agey, but really what you're talking about is the habits that you make sacred,
right.
that don't need to be sacred, right? Okay.
Yes, and so, like, I would get up and do my devotions, but if I didn't get up in time, I would cut them short so that I could be in the writing room at 8 a.m.
Mhm.
And I was really convicted by that, so I made an appointment with God for 6 a.m. every morning, and He's been waking me up at 5:30.
Of course he is.
Apparently, He didn't agree with the 6 a.m. And I've been like writing out different scriptures that has His promises in him, and it's just been really rich and deep and really good. And I feel like there's something like when you're driving somewhere and you start to see like landmarks that tell you that you're almost there and it's somewhere
Mhm.
really exciting that you want to go. Like that's how I
Mhm.
feel. I feel like I'm like there's a rise, and when I get over the rise there's like somewhere exciting that I want to go.
Hmm.
But I don't know what he's up to, but it's kind of cool.
I
That's
love that.
exciting. Yeah.
That's what's
All
going
right.
on in my life.
All right. Well, awesome. That was a quick what's up. I guess not. It's 10:15. Girls, we can like talk, can't we?
Yeah, no one will ever accuse us of not being able to talk.
I'm so quiet, shy, and reserved. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
All right. For those of you that are listening, a lot of you are quiet and shy and reserved. So I know that I probably seem like an oddball for a writer, but if you are a writer, inevitably, you probably will experience some criticism. And the first time you get it is usually the roughest. Would you ladies agree with that?
Yes.
Like for your writing, specifically for your writing.
Yeah, especially if you are expecting nothing but praise and glowing reviews, and this is the
Hmm.
most earth-shattering thing I've ever laid my eyes on.
Right. Exactly. Tina, do you have an experience with that?
Oh yeah. The first time we met together at our writing group, and I
Mhm.
brought this
I remember.
prologue that I was so proud of that I had been working on for years and I just kept like editing it, and I thought it was perfect. And then Miss Barbara, I love her,
Mhm.
said this is full of passive voice. And I said, "What's that?"
'Cause we all loved it. We loved the prologue, but that was the only piece of criticism you got, and that's what you remember,
And
right?
it crushed me. I was
Mhm.
crushed. I was like, "What?" I didn't even know what passive voice was. So,
You know what's funny to me now that you're saying this too, is that you rewrote your prologue a couple more times after that. And I remember us being in writing group, and I know Jamie and I agreed on this, and I'm pretty sure Rhonda did too, but we were like, "Go back to your original one." Do you remember this? You had rewrote
mhm.
written and we were like, we would work on it with you, but ultimately we loved your first one. But I think the fact that you got that criticism, it sent you in such a tailspin that you were like ready to like just be like,
Mhm.
have you thought you had to start over. So,
And I
sorry.
struggled
My
for
child just brought me some headache medicine. That's why if you guys saw me texting a second ago, my kids are
Oh.
the best. So, okay, sorry,
yeah,
go
and
ahead.
it took me a couple years to learn it out of my writing. You know what I
Mm.
mean?
Yeah.
Where I had
Yeah.
to really be conscious of it for a couple of years, and then eventually now it's just kind of a habit. It's kind of just ingrained in there. But it was a struggle to try to, because I thought in passive voice. I realized
Mhm.
when I my
Oh,
writing mind,
interesting.
I thought in passive voice.
So that kind of flows into my story that I was going to share about the first bit of criticism I got. Um, I had um an editor before Jamie, a gentleman that was not his genre, but we had this. He was another writer, and we had decided that we were going to like trade editing for each other. Well, I had some friends that read romance, read some of my stuff, and like, very encouraging, right? Because they're my friends. And then it got to him, and he loved my writing. He loved the characters. He loved there were so many things, and he's like, but you gotta stop the way you're tagging. And I'm like, what? Every single time I would say um, something like, leave me alone, she said, picking up a piece of paper. Oh,
Mhm.
after every she said or he said, I had an action tagged on every single time, and
Wow.
it was something that, like, I didn't see it, but once he pointed out to me, it was like it was there a lot, and he's like, "It's very clunky, and it's gonna slow your reader down," and he was right, but, like, that was devastating to me because you know how big a portion of my manuscript I had to go back and fit, like, the whole book. I had to go through the whole book just for that one problem that I had, but
Mhm.
yeah, and then, well, we'll talk about that other one later. Okay,
And
so let's
once I got my manuscript done and sent it out, I sent it out to beta readers, and one of my
mm,
beta readers was a English professor at the University of Washington, sent me like a
mhm,
typed 3-page thing that
mhm,
basically said, "I don't understand this character's motivation. I like these are the plot holes that," and ended up rewriting the entire book and ended up with a completely different story,
mm.
which I'm glad of because it was a much better story.
It is a much better story, I agree.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Alright, so let's dive into the reasons why your editor might dislike your manuscript. Um, it'd be great if when you give your book to your editor, it comes back all roses, but if that happens, I would question and probably go see another editor because there's gonna be problems no matter what. So, one of the first reasons why your editor might dislike your manuscript is a lack of clarity or coherence in the plot or storyline. So, Tina, you alluded to that you have plot
Mhm.
holes. Can you explain to us what you found out?
Well, I had written this story and about this girl going to find her mother, and the the whole reason why she was going to find her mother just wasn't clear in the story. The
Mhm.
mother's motivation was missing. That was a major plot hole. Um,
Why did her mother leave, right?
right.
None of us
And
knew,
I
right.
had her mother in the as part of the story, and
Mhm.
the way she was reacting and acting, and like it just didn't make sense to the people who were reading it. And I mean, there was just the long list of plot holes, and I can't, and honestly, it's been so long, and that story is just so forgotten now that I don't even
Yeah.
remember what they were.
Well,
But
that helps though,
it was full of it.
because that actually flows into our next, thing. So the next reason why the editor might dislike your manuscript is issues with character development and inconsistencies. So the fact that like your characters were supposed to be one way, but they weren't acting that way throughout, which I think ultimately has a basis of how much you do your planning. Well, even if you're a planter, sorry, a plotter,
Planted, I
a
like that.
planter, or a pantser, you still need to know your characters well.
Yeah.
And if there's inconsistency, you're not, you don't know your
Right, and there
characters
needs
well.
to be an arc. There needs to be change from the
Hmm.
beginning to the end. You can't just have a flat character.
Right. So for me, my experience, Rhonda, who y'all love, and she's my biggest cheerleader. She loves my character. She loves my writing. She hated Phoebe. Not my daughter Phoebe, but the character Phoebe. Remember, she hated it.
Mhm.
So I remember, I'll never forget it. We were at Tim Hortons for writing group,
Mhm.
and we were sitting there, and it was my turn. I was all excited to get Rhonda's feedback because I thought she's just gonna love this because she always loved everything I did. I got criticism from the other two, and usually got pat on the back from Rhonda, right? Because she just loves romance, and she just was the first one speaking. She's like, "I hate Phoebe," and I was like, it was like a knife in my chest. I'm like, "What?" But the more she talked, and I had to go back and I had to really look hard at how I was writing this character. Like in my mind, she was a certain way. Like she was just strong-willed and she was very much, but I was actually writing her as a jerk, not
Well,
just strong-willed. Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, and it was chapter 1, and the issue was that
Mm.
you knew Phoebe, but we didn't, and so
True,
without
yeah.
any introduction to her, to throw her, like, strong-willedness out, so it was not a problem that you
Yeah.
didn't know your character, it wasn't a problem that, you didn't, be consistent, it was just the introduction to the character, needed to be a little bit more finessed.
Which ended up that opening chapter now I love so much because
Mhm,
she was on this train ride in going home, and I actually went back in and I spent more time on the train inside of
mhm.
Phoebe and her, like, worries and her, like, kind of, like, insecurities, so that by the time you get to the point where she, like, going to step out of this train, like, she feels a little bit more confident, but down deep inside that she's shaky. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, it's a much better opening, a much better book, and I think that I still probably could have worked a little bit more on Phoebe's character, but again, you get to the point where it's like the book has to be done. Like, I just have to, like, so there's some people that don't like Phoebe. I love her, because, I think she's
Who
flawed,
are these people?
right? Well, she's
Yeah.
flawed, and I love having flawed
Yeah.
characters, and there are some people that don't want the main character. I literally had a review that somebody gave me that said that Christian main characters should not have flaws, and I was like, "You're
So you
not."
should only write about Jesus?
I guess so.
Oh.
I guess so.
And once I rewrote that manuscript and then I gave it to Jamie to she was my editor on that book. And she was like, "You need to go back in here because we can't see Angelica's emotion."
Mhm.
Because I knew what her emotions were, but I hadn't gotten it onto the page.
Mm, yeah.
Right.
And she said that to me, and I had to go back in and I had to add enough so that everyone knew what she was feeling in certain places.
Right. Alright, so our next one. Problems with pacing, dialogue, or writing style. So again, I mentioned earlier about my tagging everything. That's what this was. I had a problem with my writing style and how I was writing dialogue. Um, to me, it would seem fine because I was just like focusing on getting everything out. This is the other problem that I had at the beginning as a writer. I felt like I had to give you every single detail. Like, I
Mhm.
wanted you to imagine what was happening in the story the exact same way that I was imagining it, Which is
Yeah.
now as a writer this many years in, I realize that it's so much better to let your readers add some of their own imagination to it. Don't tell your readers everything. So if you're getting feedback from, from your editor about your writing style or about dial maybe you are giving too much, and maybe you need to back it
Mm.
off a little bit.
Well, and I would ask the editor person to be specific because, pardon me just a moment, I clear my throat. Um, I picked up a book recently and I just had to put it down. And if the writer would have asked me, I would have said, "Oh, your writing style." But then when I really examined it, I found that they had this device of using sentence fragments, which can
Mhm.
be very super powerful. But if like the whole chapter is like a bunch of sentence fragments,
Yeah.
your reader like just can't like it's fine for to salt and pepper your book with it, but I
Mhm.
found it to be an overuse. And so if the editor is giving you feedback that's vague in any way, ask them to please be more specific because
Mhm.
like Jen's feedback that she got about her dialogue tag, she was able to go and fix it because the feedback was clear. So
Right.
just wanted to throw that in there.
Mhm. And I know from reading books that when people get too bogged down in the details about what the curtains look like what kind of furniture is on the room and all that,
Mhm.
I start skipping. Like
Mhm.
I start skimming and trying to find something that's not boring.
Yeah. So writing style is kind of a big umbrella of things that could be wrong with your book. Pacing, specifically, if you don't know what that means, pacing is when the book is too slow or the book is too fast. If you're writing something that is a murder mystery, something that is an adventure book, something that is like something that and there's like lots of things happening, you have to give your reader a break at times. Otherwise, some people will just put the book down because they just have to. Like I've been in that situation before. I've had to put a book down and then come back to it later. And then if the author had given me more breaks, I probably would have finished the book faster and probably would have been a bigger fan of the writer, right? So that's what pacing is. And then problems with dialogue. I think the biggest problem, you ladies can agree or disagree, but I think the biggest problem I see with new writers with dialogue is your characters do not speak the way they do in real life. Now, of course, we cannot write exactly the way we do in real life. Because even if we were trying to do the dialogue of this conversation that ladies and I are having, we talk over each other, we stop mid-sentence and laugh and you have to be careful how you do that in writing. But you also can't have characters that speak so unrealistically that it feels false. They have to
Mm.
be realistic. So I think that what do you guys think about that with new writers? Have you seen that any of those problems?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, excuse me. I haven't read much new writing, but I think yes, like if there's feedback to give a writing group, that's one of the big ones for sure.
Mhm. All right, let's go to our chat for real quick for a little bit. Purpose Behind the Pen says this that is one issue I deal with as a Christian author. Readers always assume Christian fiction should have flawless characters. Yeah, I don't understand that because then I think one of the things that's so great about Christian fiction is for us to find ourselves in the book. I've said this before in the past that I believe that being introduced to Christian romance at a young age helped me to have a better perspective on what God's plan was for my life as far as marriage and as far as love. When the world was telling me other things of what sex should be and what love should be, I felt like Christian romance was giving me God's perspective as a young teenager. And I found myself in those books, right? I mean, how many of us as kids read Little Women and didn't identify with one of the sisters, right? Finding yourself in that book and in a book you read, I think is so important. um, so to think that all the characters should be perfect, I don't really honestly understand that.
I
And if
think
you
it's
go ahead.
I think it's a mistaken idea that there needs to be characters in fiction that we can aspire to be. And so their ideal is like, give me a role model, give me somebody who I can like. One day I will be as wholesome and pure as, I don't know, Mary Sue, who is in this book or something. But I find that to be a mistaken. I mean, I don't know if there are books out there and they're your cup of tea, super great, but how can you aspire to be somebody who is so unrealistic if there's not a thread of relatability to them, which are these flaws? I think is the mistake. I think the mistake is
Mhm.
like you need to give me a hero.
Right, but isn't that the point of the character arc? Like to get
I
your
mean, I would
character to
agree
the
for
yeah,
sure.
to the end, like, but not throughout the
And
book.
that's really the whole purpose of story from the beginning of time. If
Mhm,
you study the psychology and the evolution of story, it was okay, this caveman went out and there was a dinosaur and this is how he survived, and so he's going to tell that story and then we're going to learn how to survive. And
mhm,
so like how that's the purpose of story. We read somebody else's problems so we can learn how they dealt with it and how they grow through it. And if they don't ever have any problems, then what is the reason
mhm.
for even writing the story in the first place?
Agreed, agreed. Meg McDonald says, "We fall into this problem when show don't tell is taken to the extreme. You can't show everything, just know. And there really are times when telling is preferable." Agreed. There are times in your story that you just have to tell. I absolutely agree with that. All right, ladies, our next reason why your editor hates your book is failure to meet genre expectations or target audience preferences. Well, whether you like it or not, there are and whether you are Some people want to write to formula, and some people, that is the last thing they want. Like, it makes them their skin crawl. But whether you like it or not, genres have expectations. And if you don't meet those expectations, you're going to have angry readers, or you're not going to find your readers, right? So when you get feedback from your editor that's talking about certain things, it could be genre expectations. So what are some of those things that you could hear from your editor that will tell you that you're not meeting your genre expectations?
Well, until I met you, Jen, I did not know that, like, the definition of a romance is happily ever after or happy for now at the end. I did
Mm-hmm.
not even know that that was a genre expectation. I mean, I didn't read much romance, I didn't write romance, and so that was something that was made clear to me out the chute, and I think that you can't make a mistake there. People can be really mad at you.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Agreed.
And
Go ahead.
well, as a reader, you read a book that you really like. And then you get done with it and you're like, "Oh, I really like that book. Let me go look for a book that's like it."
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever was in that book that you really liked, you're trying to find in another book. And those are the things that we call tropes. And
Yes.
so like for mystery, it's had the red herrings and the different, like the angst of the detective's life and those kind of things that really interest us, and we might not even realize it as a reader that those are the things, that those tropes are the things that draw us to that genre.
Yes.
But we just know that we want to read another book like the one we just finished that we really liked.
Right. Um, there's a reason why Hallmark and Great American Family have such rabid fans. It's because they stick to tropes. And whether you like that or not, it may not be your cup of tea, but whatever your cup of tea is, guaranteed the popular books and the books that you're enjoying the most are sticking to some sort of trope. So we can look at, Hallmark and Great American Family and like be like, "Ugh, so ridiculous," because they do take it to the extreme. Like every movie has pretty much the same trope. If you don't believe that, you need to go back and watch our episode from 2 Christmases ago, how to write a Hallmark Christmas movie. It's my favorite episode we've ever done. It's a good
It's the
laugh.
most hilarious
It,
episode we
it
ever done.
is. It is so funny, but it also we do talk about it. So, but there's a reason why it's successful and it works for them. So, um, if you're getting back feedback like especially confusion from your editor or at certain things, that it's possible that you are not meeting the genre expectations. And so you have a couple options. You fix it and you put the things in that will fit your genre. Or if you don't want to rewrite it and your story is exactly what you want, then you need to go find a genre that it'll fit in. Like if you wrote what you think is a romance, but there's not a happily ever after, it's not a romance at all.
Yeah,
So you
call it
either
women's fiction or call it.
Yep, find
Yeah,
somewhere that it will fit, but don't try to market it as a romance because it's only gonna hurt you and your brand.
I got to tell you this story. I was at my daughter's house and she was reading her very first dragon fantasy
Mhm.
book. She said she was getting a little tired of romance. She wanted to read something different. So she started reading this dragon thing. And she's like, "Oh, the dragon sensed the guy and chose him." And my son-in-law goes, "Oh, that's they stole that from Aragon." I'm like, "Nope, it's a trope." And
Yeah.
then she's like, "Oh, the dragon this," and my son-in-law says, "They stole that from Aragon." And I'm like, "Nope, it's a trope." And like
Did she
I must have said, "Nope, it's a trope," like a dozen to 2 dozen times while we were having a discussion about
Right,
this book that she was reading, because all dragon fantasies have those same things in them, and
right,
that's what the readers want, and that's what they love about it.
right, because I'm sure Tolkien would have something to
Mm.
say to your son-in-law about, them stealing it from Aragon because
Yeah,
Tolkien is, like, the beginning, right? So, yeah, they all
yeah,
have the same exactly.
yep.
Okay, and number 5, the 5th reason why your editor could hate your manuscript is personal biases or preferences of the editor.
Ugh.
It is possible that you have the wrong editor. It is absolutely possible. So there's a couple of options there. Like maybe you just need to ignore them. Now this is an extreme. I don't think that every time your editor disagrees with you, you should just ignore them. but it is a possibility that you need to consider.
Well, Jen, you guys have in the outline here, I was speaking before about asking them to be more specific. And
Mhm.
if they
Right.
can't say, oh, well, your style just is bad or something. And then you're like, well, what specifically? And they can't answer that. There's a sign that you
Yes.
might just be a mismatch and that you need to find somebody else to give you feedback. Because ultimately, too, you need to have people with the same goal as you, which is to make the product better. If the
Yes.
goal is to tear you down, you think you're such a great writer, but meanwhile, then that's not the spirit that you want to be having going on here. You both want to have the goal of making this piece the best that it can be. So
Agree.
you want this editor to like your premise, to want this to be better, and to help you craft it, not to be trying to teach you some kind of lessons.
Exactly. Like if they cannot address the first 4 things that we covered in this podcast, they just have negative opinions about it, then agreed. Their opinion probably is biased and you need to look for another editor. Agreed.
Mhm.
Um, Tina, you were saying something about what was unprofessional for an editor.
Well, yeah, if they can't if they can't take their personal preferences. Okay, so I don't like romance
Mhm.
because of the happily ever after, because I don't like predictability. That's just my personality. I want
Mhm.
something unpredictable that I can't predict the ending and I'm like trying to figure it out as I go.
Like
That's
mysteries and yeah.
yeah, that's a personal preference.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So for me to become an editor and edit one of Jen's books and say, this is too predictable, that's a personal bias. And that
Mhm.
would be
Mhm.
completely unprofessional because that, in my job description as an editor, would be to take your romance and make it better,
Right.
not try to make it into something it's not supposed to be.
Because let's be honest, most editors specialize in certain genres. Not every editor can do every single genre. And
Yeah.
they're expert, even if they're not trying to be like biased, they might be just because they specialize in a certain genre. For example, if you want, there's an old postcast, and if you subscribe to our Patreon, it's possibly going to be on there. We've lost a bunch of the postcasts. We're trying to find them right now because they all were recorded, so they're coming to our Patreon. So if you want to see this, but there's an old postcast that we did where when we were giving feedback, I had criticism for Rhonda's opening chapter of A Cozy Mystery. And I gave my whole spiel and the criticism, and both Jamie and Tina were like, "You're wrong, Jen. You don't read this genre." And so then they were able to like in turn say why Rhonda had written it exactly correctly. And my expectations to an opening chapter were based on my expertise, which is romance, and Cozy Mystery has different genre expectations for an opening chapter, like completely different from romance. And once they explained that to me, I was like, oh, okay. And she nailed it on the head. But I thought she was like way off just because my knowledge is romance. And so
Yeah, and a lot of times when I would do Jen's edits, I would put in my notes to the side, I would say, now maybe this is the genre. So if this is the genre, ignore this note. But shouldn't it be this kind of a way? Or is he
mhm.
being too much of this? But I'm just like trying to be aware at the same time of like maybe your readers will want it. And so you should disregard my comment.
Right. Which is why after I do Jamie's edits, I will highlight certain things that I like maybe sometimes if I disagree with her, but I think is genre specific that she didn't understand, which is why I have a beta reader that is a huge fan of romance, read it, read my book and get feedback from her only on the romance aspect. She doesn't look for editing marks. She doesn't look for mistakes. She looks for just the genre. And so I have all those different layers just to make sure. So,
Mhm.
yep. So again, if you want to watch the postcast, subscribe to our Patreon for as little as a few bucks a month, less than a Starbucks coffee. You can get not only see well, the postcast costs a little bit more because it's a little bit special extra stuff, but we have lots going on our Patreon. In there, you can free. If you wanted to sign up for free, you get all the episodes of the podcast in one spot and any public posts, announcements, or et cetera that we may choose to do. At the $3 level are all the free benefits plus the knowledge that your support is blessing us. But the $5 shenanigans level is when you get to be part of our Bible study live once a month with Tina. We have a live Q&A with at least guaranteed at least 2 of the co-hosts will be in there once a month. Come in and ask any questions you have. And then a Zoom writing room that is always available, not moderated. And then if you really love us and you want to see the postcast, we have a $10 super shenanigans level that will get all the benefits of the lower tiers. Plus you get access to never before seen postcast episodes where the ladies and we critique each other. I know that at the end of every episode, we have our feeding of the backs, but it's all positive feedback because we haven't edited. The postcasts show you an inside look at what writing group with us actually looks like. And finally, if you really would like to support us and get a little bit of promotion for your book, we have our sponsor the shenanigans level, which is your book can actually sponsor one of the episodes of this podcast. So if you're interested, head on over to patreon.com/, is it Christian Indie Writers? I don't know. You can search for us. I shouldn't have said that out loud. I should have figured that out beforehand.
It'll be in the show notes.
Yes, it absolutely is in the show notes because I did the show notes. Very smart. Thank you, Tina.
You're welcome.
All right, one last look at our let's see. One last look at our chat before we move on. Eva says, in my novel, 2 Christian girls date guys that aren't Christians. There are consequences of going outside of God's boundaries. I wrote this book because I rarely hear in church about God's boundaries. Yes, we need a God-given purpose for our writing. Agreed. Purpose Behind the Pen says, speaking of Hallmark, I was once in another romance writing group and all of the other authors considered my 13th novel, which was my work in progress at the time, a Hallmark movie.
I might take that as a compliment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Meg says, personal biases are a real thing. I had an editor who was appalled that my main character wasn't a woman. She wanted me to change that with no regard to how it would change every relationship. Yeah, that's craziness.
Wow, that's a mismatch for sure.
For sure. All right, ladies, it's time for us to move on to our favorite time of the podcast, and that is the feeding of the backs.
Yay.
Yay. So every week before the podcast starts, we sprint for 15 minutes to the same prompt. We do not get a chance to edit it. And then we come on here like crazy people and share it live for the whole world to hear. So that's why we only give positive and encouraging feedback because it's not been edited. And we're going to start with you, Jamie. Share with us what the prompt was and then what you wrote.
All right. And if you happen to be clairvoyant and know that I will actually be on the podcast, you can look for my writing sprint live on the YouTube channel. I guess if you subscribe to the Christian Indie Writers YouTube channel, you'll get a notification that I'm streaming live to that channel. And you can actually watch me do my sprint because I do that. Okay. So, oh my gosh, where is it? Okay. Nope, that's not it. That's the outline. One moment. Okay. So today we had a prompt that was a theme, and the theme was, I don't care what you think. Mm-hmm. And here's what I wrote. She closed the book and sighed, staring out the window, but seeing nothing. He entered the room and she startled and stood, smoothing her skirt. So good to see you, she said, smiling and hoping that smile reached her eyes with enough vigor to facilitate the old delight she'd once felt upon seeing him. I trust you had a good day. In the days of her delighted gaze, this greeting would have been met with a kiss and embrace. Today, it was not even met. The big coat was thrown onto the sofa, emitting a cloud of factory dust, and a clunky work boot was deposited on the end of it to facilitate unlacing. It would have seemed all focus was centered on this task, except for the gruff inquiry as to what they would be eating for supper, huffed out from between the whiskered lips. I've got a roast on. Not in the slow cooker, I hope. Her face grew warm and she instinctively cradled her rounded stomach as she responded. I'm afraid it's all I had energy for today. I see that, he said, flinging his boot into the corner and raising his other foot to set to its laces. She wanted to leave the room, but the passage to the door was narrowed by his bent and hulking form. Trembling with what emotion she could not determine, rage, fear, and anxiety having all become one smooth current within her over the course of years of such interactions, she slowly sank back into the chair and reopened her book to the last mark. You spent all day with your head in that book then. I finished it, she said, closing it again and determining another course upon which to guide their conversation. On days when he'd returned home in better spirits, they'd spent a quarter of an hour or so, amiably enough, as she recounted to him the goings-on in the story she'd been reading. I found the ending to be quite unsatisfying. Would you like to hear it? Nobody cares. The statement accompanied the tossing of the second boot. I'm going to wash up. I'll expect my plate when I come down. She chewed her lip and stood, sliding the volume in among her little collection, allowing her fingers to trace along the familiar spines before turning away. That evening, she moved her food around on her plate and kept her eyes on it. As she listened to the sounds of his greedy slurping and plate scraping, she wondered why it was that the cruelest of husbands never seemed to die suddenly, as in her stories, but tended to live on for decades.
Such a great last line. Oh my word. So I had internet problems or maybe StreamYard problems there at the beginning of your story. So I missed a chunk. But what I did get was always great characters, great internal dialogue, and the whole thing was made chef's kiss by that last line. I loved it very much. So great work, Jamie, always.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yes, I love that line too, and I'm looking forward to her murdering him.
I can tell where Tina's mind is. I don't know. This feels like it's complete to me. Like I get what you're saying. Like I would like more because it's just great writing. But to me,
Yeah.
as I'm reading this, I feel it feels complete to me. Like it's sad, but she's trapped in this marriage, and this is just her life. And the shattering moment is the the fact that like they don't die like they do in her books. So why is that? Like it's very sad, but it's like it's a whole story. But I'd like to hear from you, Jamie. What are your thoughts? Is it a complete story, or is this could this be more?
I think that the end did end up wrapping it up. I was the thing that I was hoping to get to, but I glanced at my timer and there was 2 minutes left, was that, the end of the book had been that, the evil husband had died or something like that. But I am very happy that it just kind of turned this artful way, not intentionally, so that you could assume maybe that's what had happened in the book. But I was like, oh, maybe she's poisoned his food or this or that. But 2 minutes, tick tock. So,
Right.
so I went back to it and just, brought it home. However,
Who was the author of that James something, right? The author of that book that we've all read about short stories that's so good. It's a short read. James some Scott. James Scott.
I'm gonna look it up.
Okay, you look it up. But if you are interested in writing short stories, or you already kind of feel drawn to short stories, it's a great book.
James Scott Bell.
There you go, James Scott Bell. I was close. Yeah, take a listen to or listen to, yeah, you can listen to it or read his little book. Because when we say things like shattering moment, that's what we're referring to. Is
Yeah.
kind of So.
Yeah, and that was just such a vivid scene. Like so all of every scene that you write is like that, where you feel like you're in it.
Thanks. I really appreciate that. Did the language feel old?
No. Were you going for that?
Fascinating. No. I just was writing, however, but I've been listening to a lot of like George Eliot and stuff. So I was wondering if any of that bled into what I wrote. And so I didn't know if it would feel like the language was too old for like what the story was that was happening. And so that makes me feel really happy that that's not the feedback.
I mean, I was imagining her in like a dress like they used to wear in the 70s, the housewives. And but I wouldn't say the writing was old. I would just say like it felt like that era.
Great. Yeah, Meg said the language felt classic. I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, sorry. Let's get over to the comments. She said, Jamie, my heart started pounding. I was so hurt and angry. Yes. Yeah, and Meg got it for us, James Scott Bell. Sorry. Sonia says, so deep and devastating, James Scott. Everybody knew but me. I couldn't think of his name. So yeah, thanks. See, I'm telling you, we have a great group.
Well, we have a lot of things on our mind that we're trying to remember as we're podcasting. In our defense.
Yes, we've read his stuff. We should get him on the show.
Ooh.
He's a Christian. He doesn't specifically write Christian stuff, but he does do Christian stuff. Like he does Christian conferences and stuff. And that would be I don't know. We may not be big enough to get him on, but all right. So I will go next, and we're back in Marnie's world. I did steal another minute, so I wrote for
Mm.
16 minutes instead of 15
Okay.
minutes.
We'll forgive you.
Cheater, cheater.
Okay. Yeah, pumpkin eater. Marnie turned her back on Mr. Boss. I don't care what you think. Yes, you do. It was said with such an air of arrogance that Marnie turned in shock, mouth gaping. How dare you presume to know my thoughts? I truly couldn't care less what your opinion is of me or my choices. Mr. Boss chuckled. Really? But the opinions of that maze of judgmental jerks known as your coworkers matter? And before you try denying it, remember that the very outfit you are wearing was chosen based on their opinions. Marnie felt her cheeks grow warm, but she wasn't certain if it was from embarrassment or anger at how correct he was. The warmer her cheeks grew, the angrier she got. It was an unfounded anger, of course, because it wasn't his fault that he was so darned correct all the time. But she was angry nonetheless, and that anger had a mind of its own, and it decided to take over her mouth. That's rich coming from you, spoiled little rich boy, who hates his job but won't speak up for fear of disappointing daddy. As soon as the words were out, her hand flew to her face and clamped over her mouth as if she could somehow keep any other atrocious thoughts from escaping. Mr. Boss barely flinched, but as Marnie watched, an invisible veil lowered itself over his face, and a newly constructed barrier now separated the two of them.
Hmm.
I think it's time you return to your desk, Miss Martin. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have. But he cut her off, picking up the phone and dialing, dismissing her as if she were no longer there. Marnie turned toward the door. She had crossed the line. This was her boss. She had no right to judge him in silence, let alone out loud to his face. As she neared the door, she felt as if she were walking through a portal where, on the other side, would be a different relationship between her and Mr. Boss, one identical to every other employee. Once she walked through that door, things would be forever different, and it was all her own doing. Marnie closed the door and turned back to Mr. Boss. A face that had just moments ago been distant and dismissive looked at her incredulously. I said to leave. No, Marnie said as she sat in the chair opposite Mr. Boss. I would say 3, 2, 1, but I cheated.
I'm glad you took the extra minute because I want her to defy him in this moment, and he wants her to defy him in this moment, whether he would admit it to himself or not. And so, thank you for taking the extra minute.
Thanks for letting me.
Yeah, that was just good stuff. I love the relationship between Marnie and Mr. Boss. And I'm so glad you didn't let her walk out the door because you're right, it would have been different. And she's got to fix this, but I don't know how she's going to do it. So I guess we'll just have to wait for next week.
Is this a third disaster? Where do you think this fits?
I don't know. I don't know. That's the problem. I haven't outlined this story at all. We're just like getting random like insights to, which is good and bad because that's one of the struggles I'm having with book 1 of The Widows of the West is that I have so many pieces of the story that and no structure that I started with that I have to decide what am I keeping, what am I not, and what is the real story. I don't really know the real story. I think
What
is what I'm
happens?
discovering.
Yes, this is what happens when plotters are forced to pants.
I know. You guys are killing me. I know.
Well, here's the
That
thing.
that could be a podcast episode.
Yeah.
When
It probably should be.
plotters are forced to plants.
In your spare time, Jen. But if you could
I almost choked on my drink then.
I would
Spare
just be
time.
curious to know how many words you've written in this world.
Mm.
And just okay. And then I would also be curious to know that if and when you sit down to plot it, do you feel like happy that you did all of this quote unquote extra work, like pretending none of it will ever even make it into the book, right?
Right.
Because
right.
like, do you feel like it was worth it because you really know these characters, or do you feel frustrated because you did all this work and you still don't know the plot? Do you know what I mean? Anyway, I would just like to know those answers.
And
So
and do you feel obligated to use any of it? Because
there
that
is
might
already
be a problem too. Sorry.
Yeah, there is already stuff that I'm tossing from Widows of the West. Even things that I liked, but it just doesn't fit the story, and the characters have changed over time, so like it doesn't really fit the characters anymore. I haven't tried to plot this story out, but I do think that when my plan was to get book Widows 1, 2, 3, 4 Dawn before I did anything else. But I think I'm going to do Widows 1, Marnie, Widows, or one of my contemporaries, Widows 2, another contemporary, because I just feel like that's where my mind is. And I read historical and I read contemporary, but my writing, when I come to sprint, it just feels like it flows. Like this just flowed out of me, and I had no
Mhm.
idea where I was going with it. So maybe that's where God's leading me, is to do some more contemporary. I haven't published any contemporary yet, so we'll see.
Mm.
Just be praying for me, because I just want to do what God wants me to do. So
Sure.
Right.
yeah. All right, Tina, it's your turn. Share with us what you wrote.
Okay, I don't even know what this is. I just know that I sat for at least a minute and a half with my
Didn't feel
fingers on the
inspired, huh?
keyboard and
Mhm.
didn't write anything.
Yeah.
And then
All
I
right.
just said, "You just have to write something." So that's
Right.
what this is.
This
Nice.
is just something.
It's something.
It's something.
Susie tried to listen to Mr. Johnson, but it seemed his voice only droned on and on. She told him she wanted to be a writer, and he'd immediately dismissed the idea, throwing statistics at her and talking about universities. He
Mhm.
didn't seem to care that she didn't want to go to college or the fact that she couldn't afford it. So, what do you think? He said. Should we choose some colleges to send applications to? No, I don't want to go to college, she replied. He stared at her, opened his mouth to say something, shut it again, and stared at her some more. I want to be a writer, but I also want to be a wife and a mother. I've dreamed of it since
Mhm.
I was a little girl. But Susie stood before he could finish what he was saying. Look, I'm sure you're a great guidance counselor and all, but maybe you should work on your listening skills because you just can't dismiss what I want to do because you don't agree.
Mhm.
Listen, young lady, there's no need to be impertinent. I disagree, she replied. I do need to stand up for myself because obviously there's nobody else in this room who will. Mr. Johnson
Ooh.
pursed his lips. There is no future in writing. Really? Because I think Stephen King and Sarah Moss would disagree with you. And my future is not defined by what I do for a living, it's defined by my identity in Christ. Susie turned and strode from the room before Mr. Johnson could say anything else. She was sure her grade in career development was going to reflect Mr. Johnson's disapproval of her plans for her future, but she didn't care. Mr. Johnson would only be a distant memory then, and the ones she cared about and who cared about her would support her dreams. As she
Mhm.
stood at her locker, turning the padlock wheel, Reese Whitmer approached her. How'd it go with boring old Mr. Johnson? She asked. It didn't. He wanted me to go to college and become a doctor or a lawyer or something. I told him to forget it. You told him that? Yep. What if he fails you? I don't care. I don't care what he does, I don't care what he says, and I don't care what he thinks. Reese grinned. You go, girl. I wish I was as brave as you. I'm not brave. I just know who I am. 3, 2, 1.
Oh, I love Susie.
Yay.
Love her.
Mhm.
I wish I had been her when I was 18, though I did want to go to
I wish
college.
I'm her now.
Yeah. I love her spunk, and I love that she knows who she is and sticks by it, because I did want to go to college, but honestly, so much of my hunting for college and going to college was because I wanted to be a writer, but knew, quote unquote, that I couldn't make a living as a writer. So I guess I'll be a journalist. And so I
Mm.
chose a college, one of the best journalism schools in the nation, loved my college experience, but got there and realized I hated journalism. So then I tried public relations, hated public relations. I ended up getting a degree that was just communications because I couldn't like fit anywhere else, because
Mm.
now 50-year-old Jen realizes it's because Jen wanted to be a writer, and Jen was trying to fit in her little round peg into a square hole that didn't fit her, right? So yeah, that's really good stuff, Tina. I love
This is
it.
mind-blowing, Jen, because that sounds very Marnie to me.
Oh, and she's in Boston. Maybe.
That's
Hey,
so strange, Jen.
that's
I got
weird.
goosebumps thinking about it. Maybe that's why it's so easy for you to write. Maybe you're like resonating with
Yeah.
that version of Jen,
Yeah,
still
I'm
trying to
sure
figure
of
it
it.
out.
Yeah, I'm sure of it.
Well, Tina, I have high praise for you, and then I can't stick
Mhm,
around for the what's next. I got to get back to work. But Tina, I love that piece, and I love she knows her identity in Christ, and I'm going to be
mhm.
marinating just on that for the next week. And I really appreciate you writing a character who's that bold and just says it. I mean, you know, that's a tell, don't show, and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Agreed. Purpose Behind the Pen. It's by Jamie. Purpose Behind the
Bye.
Pen says, very suspenseful. I love it. Meg says, I want to know what she says. LOL. And then Purpose Behind the Pen says, very entertaining. I love it, Miss Tina. Yeah, I loved it too. I thought that the writing was also, it felt very genuine. Like the conversation, the dialogue, like we talked about dialogue earlier, felt like realistic and things that the way people would talk. So I loved it very much. So
Thank you.
all right. So it is time for us to move on to our final part of our podcast, which is our what's next. So this is where we share what we have on our goals for the coming week. So, Tina, what's next for you?
Well, I'm going to continue working on the editing of Shaken in the Land of the Midnight Sun and
Mm-hmm.
writing on my murder mystery. And I also have a new job, I think I might have mentioned. And it's a little bit of a learning curve, and that's taken up a little bit of my time. So um, I just feel like my week is packed full of stuff, including my getting up at 5:30 every morning to spend time with God and see what's over that hill that He has me riding up.
Mm-hmm.
So that's it for me.
Yeah. So for me, I've got a lot going on with my kids the coming few next weeks, including I have a senior that's graduating, and I met with some moms of other seniors that I'm friends with, and we're gonna do like kind of like a senior trip, and they're all talking about the plans that they're already making for the open house, and I'm like, I'm not sure I even have a date nailed down. Like I'm so far behind. So I got that all going on, as well as like I said, I'm struggling with the outlining of book 1 of Widows of the West. And I had a really great conversation this last week with my beta reader that I was telling you guys about. Um, and she's a friend of mine, and talking about how I'm having trouble like wrapping up book 4. It's done. I just have to write the stuff at the back of the book, which is my mom. It's all about my mom, and I'm having trouble. And she gave me some really good insight and was able to like really help love me through that. So I think I have it in me now to like really just do it, because I think that it's a perfection frozen. Like I feel like because it's about my mom that I have only so much, like it has to be perfect, and it doesn't have to be perfect. Especially as a independent writer, I can always go back in and change it. Right?
Hmm.
As any authors, we have that ability to do that. So just be in prayer for me. I just got to get over this hump. And I know that I keep saying the same thing every week. I'm still writing, I'm still working, but this is the weight around my neck that's weighing me down. So I
Right.
just got to get that done. So
Yeah.
all right. Um Purpose Behind the Pen says, just adding the sneak peek for my final draft. I finished writing book 5 rewrite during the podcast. She finished writing book 5 rewrite during the podcast. Well, I'm glad we were here to get you across that
Yeah,
finish
that's
line.
exciting.
Yeah, that's great. All right, we thank you everyone who tuned in. Again, don't forget to go over to Patreon, and if you love what we do, help support us financially. Again, we none of that money goes into our pocket. It all feeds back into the podcast to continue this ministry. Um, and yeah, that's what we're here for, is just to be a group of other Christian writers for us to share. We're not perfect. You guys have figured that out already. We're just here to have conversations and to be a support group for each other. So, well, thank you everyone for tuning in. Until next time, may your pen be prolific, may your deadlines be met, and may all of your words honor Christ. Bye now.